Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Mark Leslie, author of Macabre Montreal. Mark, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, Paul.
Are you ready to get started?
I am indeed.
All right. Question number 1. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Well, I'm assuming that they're writing the book. The most consistent piece of advice I could give would be finish the book, because that's goal number 1. That's key number 1. I meet so many writers who are in the process of writing the book, and so many that end up getting distracted by new projects. You hit the mid-book slump, or you get to a certain point and something else seems more compelling, and you can't move forward until you finish the book. So I think if they're in the process of writing their book, then definitely finish the book. Just get it done is the critical piece of advice for that.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think the hardest part right now for authors is authors have never had more information or more choices than ever before in the history of publishing. So, I mean, there's options for traditional publishing, and 10 years ago, it was a lot more difficult to self-publish. I mean, it was with the advent of Kindle and ebook publishing that really opened up the opportunities for authors. But even among that, the information is the most challenging. So when you think about whether or not you're going to send it to a publisher to be published, and I'm talking about a traditional publisher where they actually pay you, the author, not where you're paying someone to publish your book for you, or you're deciding to self-publish, and even within self-publishing, is it a completely DIY-driven process where you have to hire the editor, the designer, etc., or do you solicit the help of a third-party company that is an expert at finding the help and support that you need to get the professional cover, to get the professional editing done? And then, of course, once the book is published, what are all the marketing opportunities? So I think the hardest part is sorting your way through the information and choice. And I liken it to advice I heard from an author friend of mine recently, which I really admire. Is she says writing advice is like a buffet. And you're going to get tons of information. You're going to get tons of choices. And like a buffet, you can listen to it all, smell it all, sample it all, look at it all, and decide what you're going to put on your own plate that works for you. Maybe you're allergic to this, so you can't have this. Or this is a taste you really, really enjoy, so you're going to come back for seconds. And so if you consider the opportunity, the information, and the choice that you have in front of you like a buffet, and there's no one way of doing it. And the only right way of doing it is the way that A, is most comfortable for you, and B, is the one that allows you to reach your goals, whether that's just getting the book out or whether that's selling lots of books or whatever the goal happens to be. And that's unique for every author, and in some cases for each individual book.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
I think one of the ones that I used really, really well was for a traditionally published book, which is a book of ghost walks, and it was for a particular city. And so the very first book I launched, Haunted Hamilton, I solicited the help of a local ghost walk group. So they do historical ghost walks of the city, and my book was about ghosts of the city. And so for the book launch, we held it at a downtown library location. And I solicited them, who were actually, they provided content for the book as well. So I'd been working with them prior, in the creation of the book. I had them do a free mini ghost walk. It was a 15-minute ghost walk of 3 locations nearby the downtown library. And so what we got was people who were interested in the book, who knew about the book and were interested in the book, would learn about the ghost walk people, and that was advertising for them. But then people who knew about the ghost walks could learn about the book. So it was a really great cross-promotional activity. And it was also, it was done as family-friendly. So, I mean, even though it was ghosts and a little bit scarier, we had a lot of families come down, and it was a fun evening. So you get to go to the reading, a little bit of a talk about the book. Then there was a bookstore there that was selling copies of the book. And then after the talk, we had a mini ghost walk. So it was like this engaging interactive activity. And it was something that people could plan to go and do for an evening. Like it was basically 2 hours out of their night. And that worked really, really well as a brilliant cross-promotion, as opposed to just having an event where you go and there's a guy with his book. You actually have, if you're interested in the book, that's great. But the ghost walk or that engaging interactive activity gave them something interesting to do that made it more of an evening event rather than just some guy selling his book.
Well, that's such a great idea, is utilizing that, having the book specifically, about ghosts and having these ghost walks, so to speak. It's just a great way for cross promotion.
Yeah, that worked out quite wonderfully for both of us.
Excellent. What other tactics have you used that have been effective?
I mean, I've done similar things. What I try to do is I try to remember that when you're doing a physical event and people have to take the energy to go to your book event rather than to go see a movie or to go to a concert or go somewhere else, is try to remember to try to entertain them. They're looking for entertainment. Sometimes they're just looking for information, but that's worked really, really well. I mean, similarly, if you're launching an ebook, then perhaps you can do a digital version like that, where you provide some sort of either backstory, because there's often research that you want to share, which may appeal to a demographic. In this particular case, people who are interested in local history, and sharing that information in a way. So, for example, maybe it's a Facebook Live thing where people are live, they can watch it live, and then later on they can come back and watch it if they missed it. So let's say they were at work or they were otherwise engaged or something like that. So you can kind of get the same sort of feel, but in that particular case, maybe you have a special guest who is an expert in that topic that is your book is about, and not necessarily nonfiction. For a fiction book, you can do the same sort of thing, because chances are there's some sort of expertise related to the topic of your book that may be intriguing and maybe an interesting offshoot discussion that can pull in people who might be part of your target reader base.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Well, I think if I were to think about my favorite nonfiction book, particularly for writers, is I have to go back to Stephen King's On Writing. This is a book I have read a dozen times already. I've read it in print, I've read the ebook, and I've listened to it multiple times. And I think the thing that I take back from this is the advice. It kind of leads back to the advice I would give an author is finishing the book, and that's when Stephen King talks about write with the door closed and edit with the door open, meaning shut off the editor or that other part of your mind that is criticizing and looking at your writing critically. Just get it out, get it written, get it onto the page or the digital page or whatever it is. Get it finished first, then worry about making it better, because you can't make it better if you don't have it. And I think that's core advice that I constantly have to remind myself about.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, again, it has to go back to writing. Hugh Prather was a writer, and there was one of his books called Notes to Myself, and it's a quote I've kept on my writing space for almost 30 years now. It's on a whiteboard not far from where I do most of my writing when I'm at home, and the quote is, "If the desire to write is not accompanied by actual writing, then the desire is not to write." And for me, that's a reminder that if you actually really want to be a writer, the most important thing you can do is write. Yes, there are other things. There's distractions. For myself, when I'm doing a nonfiction ghost story book, there's lots of research, and the research is fun because you can go down rabbit holes. There's marketing. There's all these other activities. But the most important aspect, the most important thing you can do is write. And that quote reminds me of that value, because you can't publish unless you've written. And it all comes back to that at the beginning.
Mark, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
People can find me at markleslie.ca, and from there you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, my YouTube channel, all the things, all the places.
Mark, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you so much, Paul. I appreciate it.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.